All right, happy Monday. It's May 11th, the week of May 11th. We are continuing to solve quadratic equations by finding the zeros. They're also called the roots, which coincidentally this week we are going to be solving the quadratics by finding the zeros by using square roots. So as you look at the screen here, basically all of our quadratics this week will not have the b value in the middle. It will be x squared plus or minus c is the format we'll be going through, and you'll see that with the examples today. So sometimes, first thing to think about is when you're finding square roots, as usual, we can have two solutions, we can have one solution, or we could have no solutions. And you'll see examples of those as we go through. This is the first video. I'll go through the slides, and then the second one, I'll use the whiteboard behind me and go through some more examples there. So let's take a look at this one. 3x squared minus 27. To solve that, we are basically solving the equation for x. Now, the golden rule of algebra, you can find the square roots of both sides of the equal sign. So we will be doing that throughout. First step, of course, to get the x by itself, add 27 to both sides. You can do that. Now when you look at that, they're not perfect squares, so you might be thinking, well, Mr. Taylor, we can't do that. But if the x squared, is being multiplied by 3, we can divide both sides by 3, and look what we get, x squared equals 9. Now you're all way ahead of me, and you're thinking, I've got it. The answer is 3, and of course that answer would be half correct. Do not forget, it's a plus or minus square root, so it is 3 and negative 3. Okay, equals 3 and negative 3. So that's the simple part. We can do this. Next one, here's another example. X squared minus 10 equals minus 10. First step, you'll add 10 to both sides. You get x squared equals 0, and sure enough, as you find the square root of both, the only solution is 0. There will only be 1. I know what you're thinking. This is pretty easy. I got this. Let's see here. It's more complicated, but we can do this. Negative 5x squared plus 11 minus or equals 16. Subtract 11 from both sides, first step, and we'll end up with negative 5x squared equals 5. Well, this looks better. I can divide both sides by negative 5. I get x squared equals negative 1. Now you should know, as you're finding the square root, there is no such thing as a square root of a negative number, so this example has no solutions. Okay. So those are the three fairly basic examples. They can get a little bit trickier. Just take a look at these three real quick. I'll pause it if you need to. What's the first step in each one? Find the first step in each one. Number 1, you'll divide by 3 or by negative 3. Here, you'll subtract 12. Here, you'll add 15. When you divide by negative 3 here, you'll end up with x squared equals 25. When you subtract 12, you'll have x squared equals negative 2. When you add 15, you'll have 4x squared equals 0. This, of course, will be 5 and negative 5. X squared equals negative 2. No square root of a negative 2. No solution. And 4x squared equals 0. Divided by 4, you find the square root, and you will get 0 for that. So that's the easy stuff. Now we'll get a little bit more complicated. What time am I at right here? We're at, what does it say? Okay, I hope this works out. X minus 1 squared equals 25. We can still do this. We'll take the square root of both sides. Okay, square root of both sides. And this looks weird, but it makes it very easy. Well, the square root of x minus 1 squared is x minus 1. Now remember, this is plus or minus 5. Now we're getting a little trickier. So we got to make two equations. X minus 1 equals 5, and x minus 1 equals negative 5. Just like when we did inequalities and absolute value. So we have 1 plus 5, 1 minus 5. Two answers are negative 6, I'm sorry, I have my glasses on. 6, and negative 4. 1 plus 5, 1 minus 5. Jack in the Box. There's our random picture today. It's a classic toy, the classic Jack in the Box toy. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those. They came in a little square like that. You crank the handle and it has this little tune you've heard, that one, and the guy comes out of there. Then of course the fast food chain hijacked it. So your first random video thing today is the Jack in the Box toy, classic Jack in the Box. So these last 3 examples that I gave here, and these 3, and these I feel pretty confident in. These get a little bit trickier right over here. 4 is pretty simple. X plus 7 squared equals 0. You'll find the square root of both sides. You'll get x plus 7 equals 0. You subtract 7 from both sides, and you have one answer of negative 7. These 2 are a little bit trickier as we get some irrational numbers and fractions involved. And I'm going to do these 2 on the second part of the video. So this ends part 1. I kept it under, almost under 5 minutes, 6 minutes. So that's our part 1 of the video. And Jack in the Box, the classic Jack in the Box toy was our clue. So that's just for part 1. And stay tuned for part 2.